All right, so good afternoon, everybody. I want to begin today with my condolences to families here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and across the West who have been devastated by the tragic accident involving the Humboldt Broncos. This evening, there will be a vigil in Humboldt, timed for when the puck was supposed to drop. Our province and our country are in mourning. Our flags have been lowered, and our hearts are with absolutely everyone who was affected. Now, on the matter of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain expansion, Albertans have been clear. Get this pipeline built. And Albertans are right. This pipeline must be built. Tens of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars to the economy are at stake. Better public schools, better public hospitals. That's what this pipeline means for us and for our country as a whole. Kinder Morgan has now put a deadline of May 31st in place. I regret that the Houston-based board of Kinder Morgan is still frustrated by not knowing how many more legal fronts on which they will need to fight. If I was a resident of BC, I would be very worried about what this says about the investment climate in British Columbia. How can the economy of British Columbia be built when every private investor considering a project must weigh the risk that the provincial government will conduct itself in the way that it has on this matter? That should actually not only worry British Columbians, it in fact should worry all Canadians. Now, to be clear, to this point, we have won a series of important and decisive legal victories. The courts threw out BC's last case without even hearing it, and I am confident that we will continue to win. Today, Minister Carr has called on the Government of British Columbia to suspend all threats of delay to the Trans Mountain expansion. Those are strong words, but we need more. We are also calling on the federal government to act in the defense of Alberta and working people in Western Canada in the way that they have in the past for other parts of this country. During the auto crisis, Ottawa intervened to help workers in Ontario with concrete action. When aerospace needed a bailout, Ottawa stepped up for workers in Quebec with concrete action. And now the energy industry and Western Canada and Western Canadian workers, they need Ottawa to step up. And we call on them to act with concrete action. A federal approval of a project must be worth more than the paper that it is written on. As well, I have two things to say to British Columbia. First, Premier Horgan believes he can harass this project without economic consequences for British Columbia. There, he is wrong. We will be bringing forward legislation in coming days, giving our government the powers it needs to impose serious economic consequences on British Columbia if its government continues on its present course. Second, Premier Horgan believes he can harass the investors and the managers of Kinder Morgan, hoping that they will just give up and that this will kill the project. There he is wrong as well. Investors in Houston may or may not ultimately have the stomach for this fight. And maybe the government of BC feels they can mess with Texas, and who knows, maybe they can. But let me be absolutely clear. They cannot mess with Alberta. If we have to, Alberta is prepared to do whatever it takes to get this pipeline built, including taking a public position in the pipeline. Put another way, Alberta is prepared to be an investor in the pipeline. And let me be clear, if we take that step, we will be a significantly more determined investor than BC has dealt with up to this point. Never count Alberta out. This pipeline will be built. Thank you. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Premier, has this come as a surprise to you to see this at this time, this statement from Kinder Morgan?
You know, I think that we've all been looking to see work on getting clarity established, sped up and accelerated. This particular announcement, outside of the last 24 hours, obviously we weren't expecting it, but we've all been talking about the need to get this thing moving. And so from that perspective, we need to get this thing moving.
Now,
So
their
now that
announcement,
they have a date, just to follow up, now that they have this date, what does it do to the, I guess, integrity of the project? I mean, do you still think it's gonna go ahead? You've said it will be built, but you've said this is what we need to have done.
So I am still pretty optimistic that I'm very optimistic. I believe it will be built. The question is who's leading that build, and that kind of thing. But it will be built, and I think there are a number of strategies that are available to well, primarily the federal government, to ensure that this is built, and that the March 31st deadline passes without any kind of significant change, other than the fact that the pipeline carries on. But we absolutely know that, as I've said, people need to step up, and we need to get this thing moving.
now you've said that you may be willing to invest. Can you explain a bit more about that in terms of the money you're looking at potentially investing in the pipeline?
You know, what I can say is simply is this, that that can look a lot of different ways, a number of different ways, what the form that would take. And we've been doing work already on what that would look like. All I will say at this point is simply this, is that if we need investors who put money on the table to be deeply confident, what I'm telling you is that there are investors out there who will put money on the table who will be deeply confident.
Are you looking, though, at spending potentially billions of dollars on this?
At this point, you know, as I say, what it could look like, we've been getting advice from a number of different corners, and who that is ultimately also can look differently. So there's a lot of discussion going on, but not enough to be able to get into rolling out the kinds of details you're asking about.
Do you see this news release today from Kinder Morgan as a way of putting a gun to the head of the federal government and saying, you know, we are tired of waiting, because we still haven't heard from the courts on some court decisions have yet to come down, but they're pulling the trigger now on this. Do you think that this is a way of them trying to force Ottawa's hand?
Well, you know, I can't speak directly to what is in the minds of the investors and the board members at Kinder Morgan and what they're trying to do. What I can say, though, is that our government believes that the federal government needs to accelerate their efforts and dig in a bit more. And so that's what we're going to focus our efforts on.
When you bring in you said the legislation's going to come in on turning down the taps, probably done in a few weeks then. Will you bring that in before the May 31st date, or will you wait to see what happens until after May 31st before using that?
Well, it would definitely come in before the May 31st date, absolutely.
I'm sorry, the sanctions would?
The legislation would. I think we'll have to see the nature of the conversations at that point, and we'll, you know, day by day sort of situation is what we'll be looking at. But for sure, the legislation itself will be well in place before then.
You said you want to see concrete action from Justin Trudeau. As you say, he's done it for other industries. Why hasn't he done it for this one, and why do you expect he'll do it now?
Well, you know, listen, there's a broad range of tools. Everyone talks about the infamous toolbox and the numbers of tools. I was thinking about an analogy the other day. Okay, well, they may have a toolbox with some tools in it, but you know what? We put gas in the vehicle that drives that toolbox, and the federal government leases it. So everybody has a lot of things that they can do to decide where that toolbox ends up and if anyone ever uses them. That being said, having tortured that analogy long enough now, that being said, there's a range of options that are available to the federal government, and they have more than anybody. They've made the decision, they have the jurisdiction to make the decision, and they have a range of options in front of them. To be fair, they have been working on it. They have been seized of it. Worthwhile conversations and discussions have been underway, and we know that, you know, I've spoken today with the Prime Minister, and we know that they are committed to this project. What they need to do, I would suggest, is speed up the work that is underway.
On that issue, what did the Prime Minister say to you, and what did you say to him?
more or less what I just said. I mean, he reaffirmed that he understands the absolute need for this pipeline to be built. They are focused on getting it done. And I said, that's great. We need to speed this up.
So when you talk,
That's the short version.
when you talk about concrete actions, what are you talking about? Can you be specific about the concrete actions? Even the range, understanding that there's a toolbox.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm going to not get into the specifics quite yet because there are conversations underway. But I mean, you can speculate as to the kinds of options that the federal government has. They've been using a lot of carrots with the BC government at certain points. Maybe the stick ought to come into a play. There's also issues around how they engage with the pipeline proponent directly. And then there's also different means of seeking greater clarity in terms of the jurisdictional issues so that we don't have constant legal fronts opening up over and over and over again. So those are the general areas, but I can't get into a lot more detail than that.
Considering other retaliatory actions on top of turning down the taps, could we see a return to the wine ban, for example?
We are definitely considering other actions as well.
Because you could do those right now. You could start, you'd have to wait for legislation, of course, but you could do other, could we see something in the coming days on retaliatory action?
Well, I don't want to, there are other tools that we are looking at right now, and we'll roll them out depending on the timing and what works best.
Have you spoken to John Horgan?
Excuse me. No, I haven't. Oh my, no. Sorry, that really was coincidental. No, we have a call. I have a call into his office. I hope to, and I expect that I will.
How angry are you right now?
I am absolutely calm and confident that we will get this pipeline built.
Why are you calm though? I'd be angry. Why are you not angry?
In this job, you just need to keep your head about you, and that is what I'm doing.
Just so I'm
Take
just so
Paul
I'm
and
clear
Graham,
on
and then we'll go to the phone
investment part, are you talking a range from direct investment to loan guarantees, to helping Kinder Morgan, to getting other investors? I mean, can you give a sense of the range of things that you might do to ensure that the pipeline goes ahead?
I think if you were to sit down with, an investment banker, they could probably talk to you about the 19 different models that it could look like. So I'll let them do that, because it is obviously something that would be subject to negotiation, and it is absolutely not something that we would be looking at walking out at this point. So there's a broad, quite a large number of models that could define what it looks like.
Were you surprised by what Kinder Morgan announced?
Well, as I said to Kim, I was not surprised that they are getting impatient and that they are looking to accelerate decision-making here. We knew yesterday that this announcement was coming. I didn't expect it before that.
We'll
Your
take.
New York trip?
Well, as you can tell, I am here and I'm not in New York, and so I have canceled my trip to New York because I felt it was more important to be here to deal with this. I do still anticipate going out to Toronto to meet with investors and business folks later on this week.
Graham, are you good now?
No, that's already answered.
Okay, we're going to go to the phone lines now. Operator, please pursue the first caller.
Thank you. The first question is from Chris Marco of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, Premier. Just to clarify, right now this pipeline is in operation and it is moving oil. This is an expansion project, and you're talking about taking some sort of equity role in this project. Have you had a conversation with Kinder Morgan about buying the pipeline outright?
Again, at this point, I think what we're going to do is just say that there are a number of ways that, or this engagement that I am suggesting that we are considering could look like a number of different things, and there is a range, and we are looking at all of them.
Do you have a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, I just wondering, what kind of conversations have you had with Kinder Morgan? And I'm a little curious why they're taking this action now rather than a week or two ago. What kind of message have they told you in terms of why they're making this decision at this moment?
Well, I think, I certainly have had conversations with Kinder Morgan. We have pretty regular conversations. I think that at this point, they're primarily driven by the risk of there being repeated legal fronts on which they need to engage. So notwithstanding that we've been nothing but successful on those legal fronts, I think that they are concerned by some of the statements made by the government of BC around constantly looking for new ways to contest it. And so I think that is what's driving their actions at this point.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Thank you. The next question is from Don Braid of Calgary Herald. Please go ahead.
Premier, the BC government is expert at vagueness and illusion rather than actual concrete actions. It seems one of the things that seems to be bothering Kinder Morgan the most is the constant poisoning of the atmosphere without any actual real substance behind it, but the poisoning of the investor environment. And I'm just wondering how you get, or Ottawa gets, the commitment out of Horgan to stop this, because it's all so vague but so damaging. What exactly do you expect Horgan to say, either in public or private, and mostly in public, that will stop this and allow Kinder Morgan to go forward? What exactly do you think is needed from him?
Well, I mean, I think we've been clear all along that in essence, what has to happen is BC needs to understand that this is a federal decision taken by a federal government that has the jurisdiction to take that decision. While they have every right to work to find the best practices around protecting the coastline and preserving the environmental safety around the pipeline construction, it all needs to be subsequent to the fundamental action of building the pipeline. And so that's where there's a lot of game playing still going on, and that's where we need greater clarity.
Do you have a follow-up, Don?
Do you think then that basically this is part of the game, that Kinder Morgan is Kinder Morgan bluffing here, and have you people been coordinating that, as you and Ottawa and Kinder Morgan coordinating on this enterprise that's happened today with Kinder Morgan?
No, I would not go that far, Don, but what I will say is that there are, the federal government, Kinder Morgan, and without question, the government of Alberta are committed to getting this pipeline built. But coordination, absolutely not. But at the same time, I get that there are investors in the U.S. that are a little bit tired of hearing an elected government muse about challenging the authority of the federal government. And I think that this goes to a much larger issue, which I referenced in my comments, which is that nationally, we must be able to attract investment dollars, and we can't do that with this kind of uncertainty. And we need to be able to demonstrate that we are able to make big public policy decisions that land. And so I think that it's fundamentally important, generally to all Canadians, for us to demonstrate that outcome. And so there's no coordination on that, but I think there is a meeting of minds.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Thank you. The next question is from Rick Bell of the Calgary Sun. Please go ahead.
Just one question, and I don't have a supplemental. Do you think this announcement by Kinder Morgan today might actually embolden the BC government, that might give them a little extra spring in their step, as well as embolden the protest movement, which is growing in BC?
I'm not sure whether it will or won't, but I can say that the response that they're going to receive from Alberta and generally from investors would make that a fairly short-lived emboldenment, because this is not in the best interests of regular working people. This is not in the best interests of people, having jobs that allow them to pay their mortgages and put food on the table and, keep the roof over their head. It just is not common sense. And so the reality is that, that people are going to figure that out pretty quick.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
There are no further questions on the phone lines.
Do you
Premier,
think, sorry, do you think
Albertans
that,
will
do you think
respond
that
to-
Kinder Morgan is in some ways being premature because we have not seen the court decisions here? There's two of them
Right.
outstanding, the
Right.
main one being from the Court of Appeal federally. That could be thumbs up, thumbs down. Are they being premature by doing this now before that court decision has come down?
I think, again, you'd have to ask them that. I think their issue is not with those two court decisions. I think their issue is actually with the threat of other ones coming from BC, their alleged new reference case, all that kind of stuff. Comments that have come from the Minister of Environment about continuous appeals, that kind of thing. I don't know. But you are right that there's those other two decisions coming, and I think most people feel fairly confident that we'll be successful on those.
Take Kim's question and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. How do you think Albertans will respond to the idea that its government is pondering, perhaps becoming an owner of the pipeline or investing or using public dollars to advance this pipeline?
Well, I think what we know is that Albertans, that is an unprecedented level of support for this pipeline to get built and to go through, because Albertans understand what happens when we're not able to get the most value from our resources. We've seen that story play out very dramatically, very painfully over the course of the last 3 years. To be clear, nothing would happen without incredible due diligence and without a strong understanding that at the end of the day, it could ultimately be a net win for Albertans and for taxpayers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.